Buddhāvataṃsaka Sutra. Book 39. Entry into the Realm of Reality. Video 32. Then, by the empowerment of Buddha, looking over the 10 directions, Gopa uttered these verses illustrating what she meant. Those who set out for vast pure wisdom for the welfare of others and serve true benefactors honestly with tireless vigor, seeing them as teachers, carry out practice in the world like the cosmic net. Those whose devotion is vast as the sky, embracing all worlds of past, present, and future, all lands, beings, phenomena, and Buddhas, theirs is this practice, producers of the light of knowledge. When the will is infinite as the sky, supremely pure, free from the taint of afflictions, therein arise the virtues of all Buddhas concentrating the whole variety of the cosmic net of practice. The wise who rest on great oceans of virtue, inconceivable, infinite, vast as omniscience, as pure offspring of the body of all virtues they act in the world unstained by the filth of the world. Those who listen to the teaching of Buddhas and tirelessly catch every nuance are lamps shining with wisdom in accord with truth. Theirs is this practice which lights the world. Those who perceive in an instant of awareness the infinite Buddhas everywhere, interrelated, contemplate the ocean of all Buddhas. This is the way into the mind of the enlightened. Those who see the vast audiences of the Buddhas enter the ocean of their meditations and their infinite ocean of vows. This is the practice of those like the cosmic net. Those empowered by all the Buddhas practice universal good for endless ages, reflected in all lands. This is the practice of the lights of truth. The sons of compassion and knowledge emerge, steadfast, seeing the misfortune of the world, and disperse the darkness of delusion with the light of truth. This is the practice of those like the sun. Seeing people revolve in the rut of existence, the wise stand opposed to the flow of the mundane world. Developing the measureless wheel of true teaching, they practice universal higher goodness and wisdom. Those who learn these infinite principles, appearing in the world according to people's mentalities, with their own bodies like reflected images, develop people in the oceans of being. Suffusing the world with myriad expressions of love, showing spiritual practice to people of various interests, teaching them according to their mentalities, the steadfast lead billions to enlightenment. Then Gopa said to Sadhana, I have attained an enlightening liberation whose sphere is observation of the ocean of concentrations of all enlightening beings. Sadhana asked, what is the scope of this liberation? Gopa replied, having attained this liberation, I penetrate as many ages in this world as atoms in untold Buddha lands, and I know all the beings in all conditions of existence therein, and I know all the deaths and births of those beings, their developments, their accomplishments, the variety of results of their actions. I know their undertakings, good, bad, liberative, non-liberative, certain, uncertain, wrongly fixated, compulsive, non-compulsive, based on good, not based on good, fostered by evil, fostered by good and evil, good by development, bad through neglect. I know the oceans of names of all the Buddhas in those ages as numerous as atoms in untold Buddha lands. I know the oceans of initial inspirations of those Buddhas, the ways they set out for omniscience, their undertakings of the oceans of all vows, their heading for previous Buddhas, their oceans of efforts in the service of previous Buddhas, their oceans of fulfillment of past enlightening practices, their oceans of arrangements of means of emancipation. I also know the oceans of those Buddhas' development and guidance of sentient beings, and I know their oceans of attainment of enlightenment, their majestic displays of mystic power in turning the wheel of the teaching, and their oceans of miraculous displays of all Buddhas. I also know the differences in the audiences of those Buddhas, and I know the methods of emancipation of the listeners in those audiences, as well as their past routes of goodness, the variety of their cultivation of the path, and the difference in the purity of their attainment of knowledge. I also know the sentient beings who have been led to individual enlightenment by those Buddhas, and I know the past routes of goodness of those individual illuminates, as well as their attainments of individual enlightenment, the doors of liberation mystically developing in their peaceful states, their various spiritual transformations, their development of others, their teachings, and the various freedoms of liberation in their infinite states of concentration. I also know the ultimate extinction of those Buddhas. I also know the oceans of enlightening beings surrounding those Buddhas, and I know those enlightening beings' first cultivation of roots of goodness, their first inspirations and vows, the variety of their vows, the variety of their production of arrangements of vehicles of emancipation by all the practices of enlightening beings, the variety of their perfection of provisions for the path of transcendence, the variety of the manifestations of their practices of the path of enlightening beings, the variety of their provisions for advancing through the states of enlightening beings, the variety of the speed of their advance through the states of enlightening beings, the variety of their spheres of concentration in the stages of enlightening beings, the spiritual manifestations of their advance through the states of enlightening beings, their spiritual states during their progress through the states of enlightening beings, their footholds in the stages of enlightening beings, their practices cultivating the states of enlightening beings, their methods of purifying the stages of enlightening beings, their abodes in the stages of enlightening beings, their characteristics in the stages of enlightening beings, their mastery of the stages of enlightening beings, their science of entry into the stages of enlightening beings, the enlightening being's science of salvation, the enlightening being's science of development, the different states of enlightening beings, the mystic projections of enlightening beings' practices, the oceans of concentrations of enlightening beings, the oceans of methods of liberation of enlightening beings. I also know those enlightening beings' attainments of oceans of various concentrations in each moment of consciousness, their discoveries of the range of omniscience, their tremendous flashes of omniscience, their means of attainment of the forbearance of enlightening beings, their plunges into omniscience. I also know those enlightening beings' travels to oceans of land, their penetrations of the principles of oceans of phenomena, the variety of characteristics of all things, the mystic projection of the designs of all states of enlightening beings, the oceans of principles of various vows, and the variety of oceans of miracles. Just as I penetrate the various oceans of ages past in this world, in the same way I know the endless unbroken succession of ages of the future. And just as I know all this in this world, so do I know it in all the worlds within this world. And just as I know this in all the worlds within this world, so do I know it in all the worlds in the atoms of this world. And just as I know it in all the worlds in the atoms of this world, so do I know it in the worlds in the 10 directions contiguous with this world. And just as I know it in the worlds in the 10 directions contiguous with this world, so do I know it in all the worlds in the 10 directions surrounding this world. And just as I know it in all the worlds in the 10 directions surrounding this world, so do I know it in all the worlds in the radiant world system of Vairocana. And just as I know it in all the worlds in the radiant world system of Vairocana, I know it in all the worlds surrounding the radiant world system of Vairocana. And just as I know it in all the worlds surrounding the radiant world system of Vairocana, I know it in all the places in the worlds, in the oceans of worlds, in the masses of worlds, in this whole flower treasury universe, and in all the structures and features of the worlds. And as in this flower treasury universe, so also in all universes in the endless cosmos, throughout space, I know, comprehend, and recall the oceans of past vows of Vairocana, his oceans of past efforts, oceans of past attainments, persistence in enlightening practice through infinite ages, methods of purifying lands, means of serving past Buddhas, ways of receiving the teachings of past Buddhas, methods of attaining enlightening concentrations in the past, means of attaining control over utensils, ways of practicing the oceans of virtues of past Buddhas, oceans of ways of perfecting giving, methods of effecting the purification of the conduct of an enlightening being, means of attaining the forbearance of an enlightening being, oceans of force of the vigor of an enlightening being, oceans of methods of fulfilling all elements of meditation, oceans of ways of purification of the sphere of wisdom, means of manifesting reflections of life in all worlds, ways of purification of the sphere of vows of practice of universal good, pervasion of all worlds, oceans of means of purification of all lands, oceans of light of knowledge of all Buddhas, oceans of spiritual manifestations of accession to the enlightenment of all Buddhas, means of attainment of the range of knowledge of all Buddhas, oceans of mystic manifestations of attainment of enlightenment, oceans of ways of free exercise of the majestic power of turning the wheel of teaching, oceans of various audiences, the past roots of goodness of all the enlightening beings in all those audiences, their oceans of initial vows, their oceans of methods of developing and guiding sentient beings, the oceans of sentient beings matured by the Buddha as he carried out enlightening practice in the past, those enlightening beings, oceans of means of causing roots of goodness to grow in every moment of consciousness, their oceans of ways of attaining concentration, oceans of means of attaining total mental command, oceans of means of purification of the sphere of expository knowledge, oceans of mystic manifestations of accession to all stages of enlightenment, oceans of means of effecting the network of practice, oceans of gradual refinement, oceans of knowledge of gradual attainment entering all worlds, and oceans of all faculties, powers, elements of enlightenment, meditations, liberations, concentrations, attainments, and spiritual transformations. And just as I comprehend, know, and realize the oceans of enlightening practice of Vairocana Buddha in this whole cosmos, so also do I comprehend, know, and realize the indivisible oceans of enlightening practice of all Buddhas in all oceans of worlds throughout the cosmoses, throughout all space. In this way I comprehend the entry into the indivisible totality of all enlightening beings' practices, entry into the infinite web of illusion, infinite cosmic pervasion, infinite instruction, and indication of entry into the basis of endless eons, of all Buddhas in all oceans of worlds throughout the cosmos, to the furthest reaches of space. Why? Because this is the scope of the enlightening liberation, whose sphere is observation of the ocean of concentrations of all enlightening beings. Having attained this, I know the patterns of mental behavior of all beings, the accumulations of goodness of all beings, the means of purgation of defilements of all beings, the variety of deeds of all beings, the doors of concentration of all Buddha's disciples, the stage of concentration of all Buddha's disciples, the tranquility, liberation, and mystic transformation of all individual illuminates, the methods of the oceans of concentrations of all enlightening beings, the ocean of ways of liberation of all enlightening beings, and the ocean of ways of liberation of all Buddhas. Then Sadhana asked Gopa, "How long ago did you attain this liberation?" She replied, "As many eons ago as atoms in 100 Buddha lands, there was a world called producing fearlessness. In that world was an age called superior conduct. In the middle of that world was a set of 4 continents called safe. On the southern continent was a metropolis called Magnificent Trees, the greatest of 84 billion cities. Each of the cities was built on a ground of blue lapis lazuli and was surrounded by walls made of 7 precious substances and 7 moats of fragrant water with gold sand on the bottom, covered with red, white, and blue lotuses as big as cartwheels radiating brilliant webs of light and beautiful scents. They were also surrounded by 7 networks of railings made of jewels and 7 rings of palm trees, and abounded in groves of trees made of 7 precious substances. Above, they were covered with networks of clouds. The grounds of the cities were like jeweled checkerboards, the plots evenly divided by arrays of various jewels. Groups of mystic adepts lived and roamed there, and birds filled the air with pleasing song. The cities were adorned with millions of parks, and they were prosperous and wealthy. Hundreds of thousands of happy men and women populated them. There were constant showers of beautiful flowers, stirred by the wind. Hundreds of thousands of earth spirits lived in them. Furthermore, from the golden nets of wind chimes adorning all the trees came happy voices saying, "Bathe, drink, eat, practice the teaching, arouse the determination for enlightenment, realize mastery of the stage of non-regression. Happiness to you." At that time, in the capital city Magnificent Trees, there was a king named Lord of Wealth, ruler of the region. He had 84,000 women in his palace. He also had 500 ministers, and also 500 sons, all of whom were brave, powerful warriors, handsome and well-built. His queen, the foremost of the 84,000 women, was named Lotus-born. She had a son named Lord of Glory, who was very handsome and bore the 32 marks of a great man, pleasing to the sight of all. Once, as a youth, this prince went, with the permission of his father and mother, to go see one of the parks of the city, called Clouds of Light on a mountain of fragrant plants. He went together with 20,000 girls, projecting a great array of felicity, glory, energy, splendor, and beauty, admired by men and women all around. They got into a golden vehicle with 4 huge diamond wheels and unbreakable diamond axles set in the finest sandalwood. It was ribbed with well-arranged diamonds of all fragrances, splendidly adorned with flowers of all jewels, draped with nets of all jewels, with a lion's seat set in the middle of the interior, arrayed with great jewels. The reins, strings of jewels, were held by 500 girls, and it was drawn by 1,000 thoroughbred horses fleet as the wind. Overhead was a beautiful sloping canopy made of white lapis lazuli, with a flawless, immeasurable luster, supported by tall poles of blue lapis lazuli, adorned with all kinds of arrays of rare jewels, held by hundreds of thousands of people surrounding the vehicle, singing and playing music, scattering flowers and burning incense. The 8-lane road was level and free of gravel, set on a bed of all precious substances, spread with gold sand, decorated with flowers of various jewels, lined on both sides with rows of jewel trees and railings of various gems. Above, it was covered with nets of golden bells, adorned with canopies of various jewels, and arrayed with many thousands of jeweled banners, pennants, and streamers. Rows of jewel buildings were arrayed on either side. In some of those buildings were precious vessels filled with various jewels, to be given to those in need. In some buildings were all kinds of precious ornaments, for those in need of ornaments. In some buildings were wish-fulfilling jewels, to fulfill the wishes of all beings. In some buildings were vessels filled with all kinds of food and drink, to be given to whoever needed them. In some buildings were celestial foods of all the most pleasant appearances, fragrances, savors, and textures. In some buildings were various delicious celestial fruits. In some buildings were millions of fine celestial garments, for those in need of clothing to use as they wished. In some buildings were all kinds of the finest celestial fragrances, for those who wanted perfume, to use at will. In some buildings were all kinds of utensils for people to use as they wished. At that time there was a courtesan named Beautiful in that metropolis, with whom the king consorted. She had a lovely daughter named Splendor of Delight in virtuous conduct, who was neither too tall nor too short, neither too stout nor too lean, neither too heavy nor too light. She had black hair and eyes, a pleasant face, and a clear voice. She spoke sweetly and kindly. She was wise, versed in all arts and sciences, clever and diligent, dignified and serene, kind-hearted and gentle, always pleasant to be with. She had scarcely any desire, aversion, or folly. She was modest and conscientious, soft and sincere, free from guile and deceit, self-controlled. She and her mother, accompanied by many girls, got in a jeweled chariot and rode out of the city before the Prince Lord of Glory. Looking for the prince, going according to the king's directions, when she saw the prince she became greatly enamored of him. Bound by the excessive affection she conceived for the prince, unable to control herself, she said to her mother, "If you do not give me to the Prince Lord of Glory, I will die or suffer torment equal to death." Her mother said, "Do not think this way. This prince has the marks of a supreme ruler, and it is obvious that after his father passes away he will succeed to the throne and become king. At that time a special woman will appear from the sky. Furthermore, we prostitutes give pleasure to everyone. We do not serve one person all our lives as a rule. We have set out to attend the Prince Lord of Glory at the command of the King Lord of Wealth. Do not hold fast to this wish of yours, for it is unattainable." Now, at that time a Buddha named Supreme Sun was appearing in the world, a saint, perfectly enlightened, complete in knowledge and conduct, gone to felicity, supreme knower of the world, tamer of humans, teacher of celestials and humans, awake, blessed. He was at an enlightenment site called light emerging from the cloud of teaching and the park cloud of light on a mountain of fragrant plants, where he enjoyed his first 7 days since attaining enlightenment. The girl, who was reclining in the chariot, saw that Buddha in a dream. When she awoke, a goddess who had been a relative in a past life told her that the Buddha was in the park, in his first week of enlightenment, surrounded by a group of enlightening beings, before a crowd of all kinds of spirits, and that all the deities of earth, space, water, fire, wind, oceans, rivers, mountains, night, dawn, forests, trees, plants, grain, cities, foot tracks, sanctuaries, bodies of light, habitations, the sky, and all directions had gathered to see the Buddha Supreme Son. Emboldened by seeing the Buddha and hearing of the Buddha's virtues, finding a favorable opportunity, the girl then spoke these verses before the prince. I am known in the world for beauty, renowned everywhere for virtues. None compares to me in the power of knowledge. I know all arts, amusements, and magic. Hundreds, thousands of men look on me with lust, but I have no desire for people of the world. I have no ill will, neither am I pleased by anyone. I have neither anger nor hatred. I delight in the welfare of all. When I saw you, young man, excellent in form and strength, endowed with virtue, all my senses were delighted, and immense joy rose in me. Your complexion is like a pure shining jewel, your hair is black and curly, you have a fine brow and nose. I offer myself to you. You have excellent features. Resplendent, you are like a mountain of gold. In your presence I do not shine. I am like a pile of charcoal. Your eyes are large and dark, your jaw is like a lion's, your face like the full moon. The fine sound of your voice is irresistible. Please take me in. Your tongue is long and broad, coppery red, soft, shining like a jewel. With your superb, clear voice you delight people when you speak. Your teeth are even, shining white, clean and well spaced. When you show them as you smile, you delight people, O hero. Your body has the 32 marks of greatness, brilliantly shining, pure. Adorned with them, you will become a sovereign ruler of men. Then the Prince Lord of Glory said to the maid Splendor of Delight in Virtuous Conduct, Whose daughter are you, whose ward? I cannot make another's ward my own. Then he spoke these verses. O lovely one, endowed with beauty of form, with fine features and a pure body, I ask you to tell me this, whose ward are you? Have you father or a mother, brother, husband, or master, or someone else who thinks of you as his, treating you kindly? I hope you are not vicious, do not steal, are not promiscuous, and do not lie. I hope you do not cause discord, do not slander others, do not covet others' goods, and are not hostile toward anyone. May you not stand on the wasteland of views. Let your intelligence not be taken away by habits. May you not exert bad influence on people by guile or deceit. Do you love and respect your parents, relatives, friends, and elders? Does your heart reach out to give to the poor to help them? Are you well disposed towards spiritual benefactors who tell you about religion at the appropriate time? Are you truly healthy and capable in body and mind? Do you respect the Buddhas and love the enlightening beings? Do you know the supreme teaching from which the enlightening beings are born? Can you abide by the supreme religion and not do any wrong? Do you have higher love and respect for the infinite ocean of virtues? Are you kind to the helpless and lost? Are you really compassionate toward evildoers? Are you most happy to see the success of others? Are you indifferent, by the power of wisdom, to those who annoy you for no reason? Seeing people in the slumber of ignorance, do you firmly seek supreme enlightenment? Would you not weary of endless ages of spiritual practice? Then the Supreme Courtesan Beautiful, Mother of the Maid Splendor of Delight in Virtuous Conduct, said to the Prince Lord of Glory, "This daughter of mine, who was spontaneously born from within a lotus, has never before gone out of the house." Then she spoke these verses. "Listen to what I say, O Prince, about my daughter, of whom you ask. I will tell you of her birth and how she grew up. On the very same morn as your birth, my daughter too was born, generated spontaneously in the calyx of an undefiled lotus, all her limbs complete, with nice big eyes. In springtime, the best of seasons, when the crops and herbs are growing, in my beautiful grove of sal trees I utterly forgot myself. The branches were blooming with most beautiful flowers, the fruiting trees were like dense clouds. Amid the trees with singing birds I roamed, joyful, free from care. I was with 800 girls, adorned with garlands of flowers, wearing various precious clothes, well versed in song and speech. I sat on the bank of a pond filled with lotuses of various scents. The area around, strewn with flowers, was filled by those well-cultivated girls. In the middle of the water appeared a supremely fine lotus with 1,000 petals. Its stem was lapis lazuli, its petals were diamond, its pericarp was pure gold. It had a multitude of stamens of the finest fragrant jewels, and had a brilliant golden sheen. The people were confused. How could the sun rise at night? Then, the night ended. From the rising sun, stimulating with its glow, there emanated light and sweet sounds, foretelling the birth of this girl. Then this precious girl appeared in the human world, pure in the best of conduct. No deed is lost to the doer. She was the fruition of good actions in the past. With dark hair, lotus blue eyes, a clear voice and golden complexion, finely clad in garlands, she emerged from the lotus, resplendent as pure light. Her limbs are bright, her body evenly balanced. Her limbs are complete, her body well proportioned. She shines like a golden statue adorned with jewels, illumining all directions. The finest fragrance of sandalwood wafts from her body, filling the air around her. As she speaks, with celestial sweetness, a scent like blue lotus comes from her mouth. Whenever she smiles, heavenly music plays. This treasure of a woman should not be abandoned to the control of the vulgar. In the world of men no one can be found who is worthy to be her husband, except you, a resplendent figure with the marks of greatness. Therefore, please accept this girl. For she is not short or too tall, not stout or too thin. She is slender at the waist, full-breasted, suitable for you, with an impeccable body. She has perfect knowledge of calculation, writing, symbology, and technical literature. She has mastered all the arts and crafts in the whole world. She is expert in archery and always hits her mark, pacifying opponents by her power of attraction. She is ultimately successful everywhere. All her limbs are like pure jewels. She radiates an aura of light. Adorned by the virtues she has accomplished, she is fit to be your companion. She knows the cause of all illnesses that afflict living beings, and she is able to cure them by correct use of medicines. She has mastered all the different languages of the people on the continent and the variety of customary usages of society everywhere. She knows the articulation of sounds and the means of differentiation among them, and she is expert in all the songs and dances in the world. She is not jealous or envious. She is not lustful or ill-tempered. She is taciturn, honest, and gentle, free from anger and harshness, very intelligent. She is diligent, well-behaved, not argumentative, always obedient to the worthy. She is respectful, seeking to do whatever is good. She will do as you ask. She is always compassionate toward the elderly, toward the sick and the poor, toward the suffering, the blind, and toward the helpless. She is always thinking of the welfare of others, and never thinks of benefit for herself. Seeking the welfare of the whole world, she is adorned with superior virtues of mind. She is never careless, always mindful and aware, whether standing, sitting, reclining, or walking, whether silent or speaking. She is always remembered and honored. This virtuous one shines in all ways, and is always loved by people. None would tire of looking at her, but she has no attachment to the world. Respectful of spiritual friends, she wants always to see you. This far-seeing, uncorrupted lady has a pure mind, stable as the polar mountain. Ever adorned with her own virtues, she has no enemies at all. She has no peer in knowledge. She is fit to be your bride, O Prince. Continue to video 33.